All right, so we're gonna jump into today's breakout here on the podcast, and so Garrett's gonna help us unpack this topic today, and it's this topic of forgiveness because it happens in fantasy, it happens in life, and so we're gonna take a look at some players who let us down last year. Some of these, maybe players that we drafted personally, or they just let the fantasy community down because going into last year's draft, we had high hopes for them. We drafted them, early or in a specific round where we thought there was going to be value, and then those players did not live up to those expectations. And now we find ourselves in a spot. Are we willing to forgive them and draft them again? Or are we going to hold a grudge and say, I'm never drafting them again. I can't forgive them. Forget it. I'm done with them. And so let me give you a couple names, and then you can jump in, Garrett, as well. So for me, I was on the hype train for Tony Pollard last year, and he was a big letdown. And so I'm debating whether or not to forgive him. All right. Also, was a huge Austin Eckler guy. Big letdown last year. Now he's on a new team, so we have to figure out with him. And then, oh man, all about A.J. Dillon. Whew, huge letdown once again. And I can make that very clear. I will never draft him again. I am out on A.J. Dillon. So there's a few names. What about for you? Who comes to mind? We're talking mainly redraft here, but
sure.
But who comes to mind?
Yeah, a guy that was a little disappointing last year, and he had the contract stuff and then some injury stuff. Former number 1 overall running back for fantasy football purposes, and Jonathan Taylor. He was a guy that let some fantasy managers down quite a bit last year. Kyle Pitts is another one for me. Obviously freak talent, amazing ability, but was just in a really, really difficult offense last year. So I would say those two are probably the biggest ones that come to mind for me, but there's plenty of other players that we could throw out there. T. Higgins comes to mind as well. You could argue, was Josh Jacobs a disappointment or not? So yeah, there's definitely quite a few players that would fall into this category.
All right. Is there somebody kind of all time that you drafted one time and you said, I will never get him again? Because it is very clear the one guy for me, it is Ezekiel Elliott. There was, I forget what year it was. It's probably 5 years ago now that I took him in the first round. It was one of his down years. And it was just, I was like, I'm not going there again. It was too much. I can't forgive him. So I've written him on. He's on my do not draft list forever. Is there anybody for you?
Yeah. Well, there's no real opportunity to draft this guy anymore. This is going a little bit old school.
That's all right.
But Trent Richardson. Trent Richardson,
yeah.
especially as a Cleveland Browns fan. Yeah, that was a tough one.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's absolutely. And your Browns probably feel that way too.
Yeah.
And so, a couple other names last year, Travis Kelce didn't quite live up to the hype. Stephon Diggs. I'm a Panthers fan. Miles Sanders, absolutely. And then Jahan Dotson is somebody that I am forgiving and targeting this year. So I want Jahan Dotson on my rosters this season. I think I'm going to forgive Trevor Lawrence. I think he's got too many weapons around him to be much better than he was last year. So with all of this, we have this choice to forgive, because when we're on the clock, we're either going to bring our grudges to the table and say, I'm not taking that guy, or we're going to say, you know what? I'm going to move past what happened last year. It was a mistake. They had a tough year. Show them grace and say, I'm going to take him again, and we'll draft him again.